Imagine it's the middle of the night. You're standing in the middle of a remote ranch in northeastern Utah. There are no streetlights, no nearby cities, just open land, dark mountains, and a silence so complete that every sound feels wrong. Then your dogs start barking, not toward the road, not toward another animal, but toward something standing in the darkness. You raise a flashlight, and for a second, you see it, a massive creature, too large to be a dog, too strange to immediately recognize. Its eyes reflect the light, and then, instead of running away, it just watches you. According to one family who lived here, what happened next was even stranger, because when they fired at the creature, they claimed it didn't seem to care. It simply disappeared into the darkness. But that was only the beginning. Over the years, people connected to this isolated property have reported strange lights in the sky, unexplained animal injuries, voices in empty rooms, objects appearing where they shouldn't, and encounters with things witnesses could not identify. Some believe the land is cursed. Some believe it is connected to Native American folklore. Others suspect secret military research, unusual geological phenomena, psychological suggestion, or something much stranger. And after decades of investigations, millions of dollars, scientific equipment, television crews, and countless witnesses, one question still hangs over this lonely stretch of Utah land. What exactly is happening at Skinwalker Ranch? Skinwalker Ranch sits in Utah's Uinta Basin, a vast and isolated region surrounded by rugged landscape and long stretches of open country. For decades, the ranch has been associated with stories that seem almost impossible to place inside a single category. This isn't simply a ghost story. The reports include alleged UFO sightings, strange creatures, poltergeist-like activity, cattle deaths, mysterious lights, unexplained equipment failures, and experiences that witnesses say left them questioning their own senses. But there is an important distinction to make from the beginning. Many of the most dramatic events connected to Skinwalker Ranch are eyewitness claims. Some have been documented through interviews and investigations. Others come from books, television programs, local stories, or later retellings. And despite years of attention, there is no universally accepted scientific explanation proving that paranormal activity is occurring there. Still, the question remains: why has this one property attracted so many strange stories? To understand that, we have to go back before the cameras, before the investigations, before Skinwalker Ranch became one of the most famous paranormal locations in America. Back to a place where the land already had a reputation. There is no universally accepted scientific explanation proving that paranormal activity is occurring there. Still, the question remains: why has this one property attracted so many strange stories? To understand that, we have to go back before the cameras, before the investigations, before Skinwalker Ranch became one of the most famous paranormal locations in America. Back to a place where the land already had a reputation, and where stories of strange things in the darkness were told long before the rest of the world was listening. The Uinta Basin is a place where distance can feel almost physical. Long roads, open fields, mountain ranges sitting on the horizon. At night, the darkness seems to swallow everything beyond the reach of your headlights. The region has a deep history connected to indigenous peoples, including the Ute people. Over time, however, stories connected to the land would become tangled together with folklore, popular culture, paranormal speculation, and modern UFO mythology. One of the most important words connected to the ranch is the word skinwalker, and this is where the story becomes complicated. In Navajo tradition, a skinwalker is associated with harmful witchcraft. It is not simply another word for a werewolf or a generic monster. The modern internet has often simplified, distorted, or blended the concept with unrelated paranormal stories. Over the years, Skinwalker Ranch itself became linked to claims involving shape-shifting creatures and strange entities, but the connection between the property and traditional Navajo beliefs is often presented far more simply than the actual cultural context allows. There are also stories involving historical tensions between groups in the region and tales of curses. Some of these stories have been repeated so many times that separating documented history from later legend becomes difficult. And that's the first strange thing about Skinwalker Ranch. Even its origin story seems to exist somewhere between history, folklore, and modern myth. But whatever people believed about the land before, the ranch itself would not become internationally famous until the 1990s, when a family moved there, and according to them, they almost immediately realized they had made a terrible mistake. In 1994, a family known publicly as the Shermans purchased the property. They were looking for a place to raise livestock. At first, it seemed like an ordinary ranch, but according to later accounts, there were signs that something wasn't quite right. The property reportedly had unusual security measures, chains, locks, and other features that seemed excessive for an ordinary rural ranch. Then the family began experiencing events they could not explain. One of the earliest and most famous stories involved an enormous wolf-like animal. According to accounts later shared publicly, the creature appeared near the family's livestock. What happened next has become one of the defining stories of Skinwalker Ranch. The family claimed the animal was unusually large, unusually calm, and completely unafraid of people. They reportedly shot at it more than once. According to their account, the animal appeared unaffected. Eventually, it disappeared. But the story became even stranger when they allegedly followed tracks that simply ended. No body, no clear trail leading away, nothing. Now, there is no independently verified evidence proving that this encounter involved anything supernatural, a misidentified animal, an exaggerated memory, or a later retelling could potentially explain parts of the story. But for the family, this was not an isolated incident. It was the beginning of a pattern. They began reporting strange lights, objects moving through the sky, unusual sounds, and events involving their animals. Then came one of the most disturbing claims of all, cattle disappearing. According to accounts associated with the family, some animals vanished without an obvious explanation. Others were allegedly found dead under circumstances witnesses considered highly unusual. Some descriptions included unusual injuries and reports of missing tissue. Stories like these quickly attracted attention because cattle mutilation reports had already become part of UFO folklore across the American West. But again, this is where the line between observation and interpretation becomes crucial. Finding an injured or dead animal is a fact. Determining why it died is something else entirely. Scavengers, disease, environmental exposure, human activity, predators, all can create unusual conditions. Yet some witnesses connected to the ranch insisted that what they saw could not be explained so easily. And soon, their stories reached people with money, connections, and a deep interest in the unexplained. People who decided that if something unusual was happening there, they were going to investigate it. And once the investigators arrived, the mystery only grew. Predators. All can create unusual conditions. Yet some witnesses connected to the ranch insisted that what they saw could not be explained so easily. And soon, their stories reached people with money, connections, and a deep interest in the unexplained. People who decided that if something unusual was happening there, they were going to investigate it. And once the investigators arrived, the mystery only grew. The ranch was eventually purchased by Robert Bigelow, a Las Vegas businessman with a long-standing interest in aerospace and unexplained phenomena. The purchase changed everything, because now Skinwalker Ranch was no longer simply a family's frightening story. It became an investigation. Bigelow established the National Institute for Discovery Science, commonly known as NIDS. The organization brought together scientists, researchers, and investigators to study unusual claims, and Skinwalker Ranch became one of its most famous projects. This is where expectations collided with reality. You might imagine scientists arriving, setting up cameras, and immediately capturing undeniable evidence. A creature, a UFO, a ghost, something that ends the debate forever. But that's not what happened. Instead, the investigation produced a frustrating pattern. Witnesses would report strange events. Investigators would arrive. Equipment would be installed. And then, nothing, or almost nothing, until the cameras were turned off, until the researchers left, until someone was alone. This created a problem that has haunted paranormal research for decades. How do you scientifically investigate something that appears unpredictably? If an event cannot be repeated, how do you test it? And if witnesses describe something extraordinary, but instruments fail to capture it, what do you do next? According to reports from researchers and people associated with the ranch, there were still plenty of strange incidents. Lights, unusual aerial objects, equipment failures, and experiences that some investigators themselves reportedly found difficult to explain. One of the most famous claims involved strange objects appearing in the sky. Witnesses described unusual lights moving in ways they considered inconsistent with conventional aircraft. But visual perception is complicated. A distant light can appear to move strangely when viewed against a dark sky. Aircraft can be misidentified. Satellites can surprise people unfamiliar with them. Atmospheric conditions can distort what observers see. And yet, some witnesses remained convinced that at least a few sightings could not be explained that way. That uncertainty became the defining feature of Skinwalker Ranch. Not proof, not total fabrication, something much more uncomfortable. A collection of stories, observations, and unexplained moments that never seemed to provide enough evidence to close the case. And then the reports became even stranger, because some investigators began wondering whether the phenomenon, whatever it was, seemed to react to the people studying it. Imagine you're investigating a haunting. You set up cameras in one room, microphones in another, motion sensors near the doors. Everything is covered. Nothing can happen without being recorded. And then the strange activity stops, so you remove the equipment, and that night, according to witnesses, it begins again. This is sometimes called the trickster problem, a phenomenon that seems to avoid observation. At Skinwalker Ranch, some researchers and witnesses have described experiences that appeared almost personal. Not simply strange lights in the sky, but events that seemed designed to disturb the people witnessing them. Voices, footsteps, objects appearing unexpectedly, a feeling of being watched. Some individuals reportedly described seeing figures or creatures. Others spoke about intense fear, even when they couldn't explain exactly why. And that's where the psychological side of this story becomes important, because fear changes perception. When you're alone at night, your brain becomes incredibly sensitive to threat. A branch scraping against a wall becomes footsteps. A shadow becomes a figure. An ordinary sound becomes something moving closer. This doesn't mean witnesses are lying. Far from it. A person can genuinely experience something terrifying while being completely mistaken about its cause. Memory is also fragile, especially memory connected to fear. Over time, stories can become sharper, details can change, different witnesses can influence one another, and once a place develops a reputation, every unusual event begins carrying extra weight. A broken camera isn't just a broken camera anymore. It's a sign. A strange noise isn't just wind, it's something in the house. But Skinwalker Ranch presents a more difficult question. What if some of the witnesses experienced strange events before they knew about the ranch's reputation? And what if multiple people from different backgrounds, reported similar patterns. Does that prove something paranormal? No, but it does make the mystery harder to dismiss with a single explanation. Because Skinwalker Ranch isn't famous for one incident, it's famous for accumulation. One strange story can be coincidence, two might be misidentification. But after dozens of stories told over decades, the human mind starts asking a dangerous question. What if there really is something there? In 2005, journalist George Knapp and researcher Colm Keller published a book titled Hunt for the Skinwalker. The book brought the ranch's stories to a much larger audience. It described alleged encounters and investigations connected to the property. For many readers, this was their first introduction to Skinwalker Ranch, and the stories were difficult to forget. Accounts included strange animals, unidentified lights, poltergeist-like activity, and bizarre events involving researchers and witnesses. But the book also helped create another problem. Once the ranch became famous, the story changed. More people heard about it, more people visited the area, more stories appeared online, and Skinwalker Ranch began growing beyond the original property. The name itself became almost symbolic, a place where UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and conspiracy theories could all exist at the same time. But when a story becomes famous, it becomes vulnerable to exaggeration. A strange light becomes a spaceship, an unidentified animal becomes a shapeshifter, an unexplained death becomes evidence of a curse, and eventually, the original story can become almost impossible to separate from everything added afterward. This is one of the greatest challenges when examining Skinwalker Ranch today. The legend is constantly growing, and yet, beneath all the mythology, there remains a real ranch, real people, real investigators, and real questions that became even more complicated when the property changed hands once again. Because after years of secrecy, Skinwalker Ranch was about to become public, and the cameras were coming back. In 2016, Skinwalker Ranch was purchased by Brandon Fugel, a businessman who initially kept his ownership private. Then, in 2020, the television series The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch brought a new era of investigation to millions of viewers. Suddenly, the ranch was no longer hidden behind rumors and books. Viewers could watch experiments, see equipment, hear interviews, and follow investigators as they attempted to measure unusual activity. The modern investigation focused heavily on technology, drones, thermal cameras, GPS systems, radiation detectors, ground-penetrating equipment, and other tools designed to turn stories into data. The idea was simple. If something unusual was happening, maybe technology could finally catch it. And sometimes, the team reported strange results. Equipment failures, unusual readings, objects appearing on sensors, anomalous activity in the sky. But interpreting data is never simple. An unexplained reading is not automatically evidence of the supernatural. Instruments can malfunction, signals can interfere with one another, environmental conditions can create anomalies, and unusual data often requires repeated testing before meaningful conclusions can be made. Still, the experiments produced moments that fascinated viewers, especially when equipment appeared to behave unexpectedly during tests. Some observers saw this as evidence that something genuinely unusual was occurring. Skeptics saw technical problems, experimental limitations, or misinterpretation, and that's the strange position Skinwalker Ranch occupies today. The more technology is brought in, the more information is collected, but information is not the same thing as answers. In fact, sometimes more data creates more questions, and one particular area of the ranch became central to those questions, a place investigators repeatedly returned to, a place known simply as the Triangle. On a map, it's just a section of land, but within Skinwalker Ranch lore, the Triangle has become one of the property's most closely watched locations. Investigators have conducted experiments there using drones, sensors, rockets, and other equipment. According to the show's investigations, the area has been associated with unusual readings and repeated equipment issues. Some experiments reportedly detected anomalies that the team considered difficult to explain. Others produced data that sparked intense debate among viewers and outside observers. But here is the important part. Difficult to explain does not mean proof of the paranormal. Science is full of unexplained results. Sometimes the explanation is discovered later. Sometimes the original measurement was flawed. Sometimes an instrument was affected by something researchers didn't anticipate. And occasionally, a mystery simply remains unresolved because there isn't enough information. Yet the triangle continues to fascinate people because of the pattern. Reports keep returning to the same general area. Witnesses describe strange experiences. Technology sometimes produces unusual results, and investigators continue searching beneath and above the ground. Why? What could possibly be there? Some paranormal theories suggest portals, interdimensional phenomena, hidden technology, unknown energy fields. There is no verified evidence proving any of these ideas, but the theories persist because the alternative explanations can feel equally incomplete. Could geological features influence electromagnetic readings? Possibly. Could underground structures or minerals affect equipment? Perhaps. Could human-made interference be responsible for some anomalies? That's also possible. But if conventional explanations are responsible, why has the ranch produced such a long and unusual history of stories? Maybe because humans are naturally drawn to mysteries. Or maybe because something happened there and we still don't understand it. The answer depends heavily on what you believe happened to one of the most famous figures connected to the ranch, a man named Terry Sherman. After experiencing years of strange events, the Sherman family eventually sold the ranch. Their story became the foundation of the Skinwalker Ranch legend. But imagine what that must have been like. You're living somewhere that is supposed to be your home. Your children are nearby. Your animals are outside. And every day, you're wondering whether the next strange thing is going to happen tonight. According to the family's accounts, the events were not entertaining. They were frightening, confusing, and disruptive. That emotional element is easy to lose when a mystery becomes a television series. For viewers, it's entertainment. For witnesses, if their accounts are accurate, it was their life. And this raises an important question. Why would someone tell these stories? There are several possibilities. Maybe they genuinely experienced unexplained events. Maybe some incidents had ordinary explanations, but were interpreted through fear. Maybe memories changed over time. Maybe certain stories were exaggerated as they were retold. Or perhaps some combination of all of those things is true. Human experiences are rarely clean. A person can tell the truth about what they saw while being wrong about what they saw. Two people can experience the same event and remember it differently. And when something happens in darkness, under stress, with incomplete information, certainty becomes almost impossible. But that still doesn't answer one question. Why do strange experiences appear to follow this particular location? To answer that, we need to look beyond ghosts and monsters and into the way the human brain creates reality. Let's say you arrive at Skinwalker Ranch for the first time. You already know the stories. You know about UFOs. You know about creatures. You know people claim to hear voices and see strange lights. Now imagine spending the night there. The wind moves through the grass. Something knocks against a fence. Your phone loses signal. And somewhere in the distance, an animal makes a sound you've never heard before. Would you assume everything was normal? Probably not. Expectation has enormous power. This is known in psychology as priming. When you expect something frightening, your brain becomes more likely to interpret ambiguous information as threatening. That shadow becomes a person. That reflection becomes a face. That distant light becomes an object following you. There is also confirmation bias. Once people suspect a place is haunted, they may pay closer attention to events that support that belief, while ignoring everything ordinary. But psychology alone cannot prove that every Skinwalker Ranch report is explained. It can only explain why humans may interpret unusual experiences in certain ways. And there is another factor: social contagion. Stories spread, people influence one another. A dramatic event becomes part of a shared narrative. Over time, the story becomes stronger, more detailed, more frightening. This does not necessarily mean the original event was false. It means stories evolve, and Skinwalker Ranch has had decades to evolve. From local stories to investigations, to books, to documentaries, to television, to millions of online discussions. The ranch is now one of the most famous paranormal locations on Earth, which means that every new witness arrives carrying the weight of everything that came before. And yet, even after accounting for psychology, some people remain convinced because they believe there are details, data, and experiences that expectation alone cannot explain. So if it's not ghosts, not aliens, and not imagination, what else could it be? There is no shortage of theories about Skinwalker Ranch. Some are scientific, some are paranormal, and some are so extraordinary that they sound like science fiction. One theory focuses on the environment. The Uinta Basin has unusual geological characteristics and significant energy development. Industrial activity, natural gases, electromagnetic interference, atmospheric conditions, and other environmental factors could potentially contribute to unusual observations. Another possibility involves perception. Remote environments can create optical illusions. Temperature changes can affect sound. Lights can appear distorted. Animals can behave unpredictably. And darkness removes much of the information our brains normally use to understand the world. Then there are the UFO theories. The Uinta Basin has been associated with reports of unusual aerial phenomena for decades. Some believe Skinwalker Ranch sits inside a larger region of unexplained activity. But an unidentified object is exactly that, unidentified. It does not automatically mean extraterrestrial. Still, the possibility of advanced technology has captured the imagination of researchers and viewers. Then we enter the world of paranormal theory, portals, dimensions, non-human intelligence, unknown forms of consciousness. Some researchers and enthusiasts have suggested that the phenomena at the ranch may not fit into a single category, because perhaps it isn't a single phenomenon. Maybe strange lights, unusual animals, psychological experiences, and equipment anomalies have completely different causes. And perhaps the human desire to connect them is what created the Skinwalker Ranch mystery in the first place. That might be the most unsettling theory of all. What if there is no single secret? What if the ranch became famous because a series of unrelated strange events slowly collided until they formed one enormous legend? Or what if the opposite is true? What if all these events are connected and we simply don't have the language to understand how? Because there is one final possibility. The possibility that the most important thing about Skinwalker Ranch isn't what happened there, but what happens when humans encountered something they cannot explain. After all the stories, all the investigations, all the equipment, we are left with an uncomfortable fact. Skinwalker Ranch has not produced universally accepted proof of ghosts, or aliens, or portals, or shape-shifting creatures. Many extraordinary claims remain unverified, and skepticism is not only reasonable, it's necessary. Extraordinary claims require strong evidence. But skepticism does not mean pretending that people never experience strange things. People do. Every day, most eventually find explanations. A strange sound becomes a pipe. A shadow becomes a reflection. A light becomes an aircraft. But sometimes, the explanation never comes, and that's where Skinwalker Ranch lives, in that space between certainty and imagination. Maybe the stories are the result of folklore, misidentification, psychology, environmental factors, and decades of exaggeration. Maybe investigators are seeing ordinary events through the lens of an extraordinary legend. Or maybe, hidden somewhere inside all those stories, there is a genuine mystery. One real event, one unexplained phenomenon, something that happened. ND has not yet been understood. Perhaps the ranch isn't haunted. Perhaps there are no creatures in the darkness. Perhaps the lights have perfectly ordinary explanations. But imagine being there, alone, miles from the nearest city, the wind moving across the empty fields. Your equipment suddenly stops working. Then, your dogs begin barking. You turn toward the darkness, and for just a moment, you see something standing at the edge of the light. You can't identify it, you can't explain it, and then it's gone. Maybe your mind made a mistake. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe there was never anything there at all. But what if you had been completely awake? What if someone else saw it too? And what if, when you returned the next morning, there were no tracks, no evidence, nothing to prove what happened? Would you still believe what you saw, or would you start questioning your own mind? Because maybe that's the true mystery of Skinwalker Ranch. Not whether monsters exist, not whether UFOs are real, not whether the land is cursed, but whether human beings are truly prepared to encounter something that doesn't fit inside the world we think we understand. And if you ever found yourself standing alone in the darkness on that remote ranch in Utah, and something began moving toward you, would you really want to know what it was? If you enjoy true horror, unexplained mysteries, strange encounters, and stories that leave you questioning what's real, subscribe for more, because sometimes the most terrifying stories aren't the ones with answers. They're the ones where the evidence ends, but the questions don't. And until next time, if you're ever driving through the darkness and you see something standing alone in the distance, maybe don't stop to find out what it is. Sleep carefully.